as her style changes, it can change faster than the curriculum that I've purchased. Hey, you guys, some of you were interested in I did a long view of math, and I have 3 core subjects: math, reading, and French. And some of you were interested in hearing what a long view for my language studies or my reading would be. So I'm a little worse for wear today. I've been up since 3:30, and then I gave a talk on micro farming in another city, and now I'm back here. I must be glutting for punishment because I'm in front of a camera talking some more. But I really wanted to get this out, and I've been struggling doing it, and so I actually wrote a little bit of a script for it in this regard, because we don't use a curriculum for reading, for language, for literature. And I know a lot of people do, and you should. I mean, there's loads of great programs out there. I think my why for only doing it my way and not having a program is long and complicated. I just feel comfortable not having a curriculum, specifically in this subject, as well as I think flying loose and free with writing and creative writing. So, but I also think that I had a hard time in school with reading, and because of that, I'm sensitive to making sure that my kid gets to read the books that she wants to read, that I put the classics in front of her that she wants, because there's thousands and thousands of classics out there. There's absolutely no reason to force a classic down a kid's throat or force them to finish a book when you can DNF it and move on to the next one really quickly. You won't go wrong if you just keep it with classics and always go down the rabbit hole for the kid that's the one that they want to read. That's the subject they want. So I'll start with what's really the most important, and that is, you don't have to be a university professor to enjoy literature. You don't have to read the Decameron or Don Quixote to be well read. You can be the homeschool mom that you are and choose good literature and read it and enjoy it and understand it. So you don't have to rely on anyone else to choose for you. And in fact, my next point would be to go and look online at all of the 100s lists. Top 100 American classics, top 100 modern classics, British classics, Indian classics, African classics, Latin American, top 100 female writers, top 100 poets or poetry. You get the point there. Go and find them. And even if you look for top 10 books that everybody should read in their life, or top 100 books, you're going to get 100 lists about 100 books. There's always going to be a couple of the same books on each one of those lists, but you'll also, if you print them out and look at them, put them all align each or next to each other, you'll see how different it is, because my next point is reading is very intimate. It's a very personal act, and it's incredibly subjective. So you may love a book that I absolutely hate. I can't stand Frankenstein. It bothers me to no end that it's constantly paired with Dracula. I don't think they should be next to each other at all. Other people would argue with me about that. Neither of us are wrong, because it's a subjective point of view. So when you choose your books, get something that you like, that you think your kid will like, not the book that you think you're supposed to read, not the book that other people are reading. Don't have FOMO over literature. It's a complete waste of time. And then from there, I choose not just books that I think Morgan will want and be interested in, but I choose books that are going to be well above her own reading level, because I'm reading them out loud, or we're listening together with Audible. And it really depends on how my voice is, because Morgan is quickly out-listening my ability to read to her. And instead of stopping and taking forever to read a book to her, because I can only go so long, maybe max an hour and I'm spent, she can sit there for 2 hours and listen to the story. And so instead of her saying, oh, please, a little bit more, what I do sometimes is pair it with Audible. So I'll read a little bit and then we'll do some more with Audible. But in the case of Binti, for example, I could read the book to her easily. It's a novella, but the accent and the reading of the Audible reader for that book was just too good to pass up. And so we both sat there together and we read it together. And from there, I would say that even though there are some of the books, that was an at level understand. Morgan could listen to that book and understand it really, really easily. There wasn't a lot to interpret. It was more of a discussion and comparison over the style of the genre and how quick you have to be in a novella as opposed to a novel. So we were coming at it, we were analyzing that piece of literature differently than we would, for instance, Little Women or The Hobbit or something like that. But our analysis, no matter what grade level, it's going to be loose narration for Morgan, or loosely narrated. I can't say that word today, probably because I have no sleep at all. But I take Flannery O'Connor's opinion of too much interpretation is certainly worse than too little. And so while we're reading, we can read a complicated book with much detail. It's kind of the onion skin theory. There's multiple layers of classics. They're classics for a reason. They speak to many people over time, over distance, and there are many things from which you can pull. So a child can understand Peter Pan at one level and you can understand Peter Pan at another. But I'm using these books as a kind of bricklaying. So the more classics that we read from all over the place, I'm kind of layering brick by brick, one after the other, over time, a long period of time, because Morgan's in the fifth grade. We have years before we need to study anything that counts for a credit. But by the time we get there, by the time she gets there to the ninth grade, where classes start to count, they count towards something. If you're looking at furthering your education, they count for credits. It matters what you study. It matters how you study. By the time we get to that point, Morgan should have had a lot of literature at different age levels and different experiences from which to pull and use for future literature classes. And I feel like the books that I'm using are doing that and can do that better than a purchased curriculum now for us. And again, it's subjective. That's just my opinion. I personally have a hard time reading younger books, the classics or just the well-knowns, because I'm tired of them. I'm just kind of sick of Old Yeller. I think that Morgan will not die if she never reads Lois Lowry. And if we skip over The Giver, no loss there. If you read 100 of any classics, you're further ahead than 99% of the people who didn't go to Oxford. It doesn't matter what classic, you won't go wrong. You can pick anything. And if you have 100 of them, that's pretty well read. That's good. You're on a good trajectory. You probably know what you like and what you don't like and what you want to read. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here with Morgan is get the 100 classics under her belt. Well, what classics? Well, who cares? It doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that she likes them and that it instills a feeling of understanding at different levels, and also a feeling or knowledge that it's okay not to fully understand the story. For instance, I'll use The Birds since we read it recently, the short story The Birds. There are multiple levels of understanding there. You could read it as a really cool, creepy short story. You could just jazz right through it in an hour and then go, wow, that was really cool. That's creepy. And let's go watch the Alfred Hitchcock version and leave it at that. That's enough at this level if that's what you want to do. Or you could talk about, for instance, when we were in the truck one afternoon and Morgan was bringing up The Birds because we were looking at seagulls in the air, which you don't often see a seagull up here in North Dakota. And so I said, ooh, that's kind of creepy. That's like the birds. And she started talking about the story and how interesting it was. And I said, do you know that some people think that the birds may be symbolism for the Nazi air raids coming to attack at night, or waves of them, because the birds only attack during the tide, during the high tide, I think, or both tides. The author also said she got the idea because she came home, because the location of the birds is where she lived and where she grew up. She came home one day to visit and saw a tractor, a farmer in his tractor, And as he was seeding, the birds were flying frantically all around because they do that because of the seeds. They want to eat the seeds. And that's what sparked the idea. And so when I was explaining a little bit of that to Morgan, she was just like jaw dropped of, wow, I just thought it was a really cool story. And I left her with that. I didn't go into it or say we needed to study or anything like that. There was a dog situation. Okay, now we're back. So I sometimes want to highlight that, give Morgan the idea that there are multiple layers and she won't see them all, and that's okay, as long as it's entertaining for her and engaging. I also like to be really clear and really free with my opinions because I want Morgan to learn to be free and clear with hers. For instance, I share with Morgan that there are books that I absolutely don't ever want to read again, and I'm not going to read them to Morgan. If I don't read a J.D. Salinger in my whole life again, that will be fine. I hate The Crucible. I will never read Death of a Salesman again. And so everybody has that, right? We all have those books, those classics, those playwrights, this person, that poet, this person. I can't stand William Blake. I hate that poetry. But I can talk to Morgan about why that is. And sometimes it's real personal. Sometimes it was just a really bad teacher. And every time I read William Blake, I think about that teacher. Or the story didn't resonate with me, or I don't like the author. So I'm allowed to have those opinions. And I want Morgan to know that she is allowed to have them as well. And it's more than just, I hate that book or I don't like that book. It's the why behind it. Oh, maybe it's because you've read a similar story and that other one was better, and therefore you don't want to bother with this one. So maybe there's an entire genre that you don't like. Some people hate horror. Some people can't stand sci-fi. Some people can't get into fantasy. And it's okay at this age to not read certain genres, because every book in the 5th grade should be a book that the kid wants to read, period. That's it. There's like no argument beyond that for me. If Morgan doesn't want to read the book, she will not read the book. I want her to only read stories that she loves. And there are thousands of classics out there. So you can't say that you can't find a book that your kid's going to like. And of all of the classics, there are some so easy to read and so simple. A lot of modern classics are like that. And there's symbolism that they don't have to understand. So in their own minds, it's a very simple book, although later on the messaging is quite complicated. And then there are books that are astonishingly difficult to get through. I have the hardest time with Russian literature. And part of the reason might be a translation issue where I don't like the translation style, and that hampers my ability to understand the actual book because I can't read Russian. So let's talk about style and form. The things, I think I brought this up in a 4th grade literature arts or language arts video, and that was what I read for her. It's not just classics, but I have a list. I want to cover novels, novellas, nonfiction, fiction, obviously, and then there's poetry, and there's plays, there's articles, there's essays. All of these things I want to combine so that Morgan knows that everything can play off of each other. Why? Because if you read a book and in the 9th grade or 10th grade, you need to write a 10-page paper. I don't know, do they write 10-page papers? I think I did. So you need to write a 10-page paper on whatever, the symbolism of windows and Wuthering Heights. Well, the more you have read already, and that can include poetry and it can include plays, you can bring that in. You can say, well, for instance, in this play or in this poem, you can't do that if you're not well read already. You won't have that background or that deep well of other stories to bring up. And then I also found something that's really important is once we finished a really thick book, we need to take a break and do a couple of thin books. Kind of just, I'm not sure why, maybe it's a cleansing palette or something, but before we're able to tackle another large thing, we like to read smaller things. And so I find that that's where a few more smatterings of articles and poetry and little shorter stories really help, because it gives us a break, but we're still reading just as much. It's just as many pages, but we can get through more stories that way. There's a feeling of accomplishment too, where you look down and your kid looks down and goes, oh wow, because they don't really think about the depth necessarily or the number of pages. They can. I mean, any kid should be, proud to read a book that's an inch thick. But there's also the feeling of accomplishment by numbers, of instead of just 2 large tomes. Oh, well, I've read one really big book and 15 other smaller ones and 14 essays and 30 poems. And it kind of inspires them to collect literature and poetry in their minds, to collect it on maybe a list so that they can keep track for themselves all of the things that they have read and a little blurb about what they are about. And ultimately, you will never go wrong if you simply pick anything you want and your kid wants. Just absolutely anything. All classics are good. All classics are worth reading. Not all of them resonate with you. So pick out of the thousands and thousands out there, pick what resonates with you and your kid, and you won't go wrong. So I hope that helps you understand why I want to be free from a literature curriculum. I want the ability to choose. Morgan and I, my style doesn't change as much, but hers frequently does and will continue, because we're really in that big period, the many wide years of big change with our kids, right? From 5th grade all the way into beyond. And as her style changes, it can change faster than the curriculum that I've purchased. And so by keeping it loose and free like this and allowing us to read anything we want, it keeps Morgan on point, focus on really, really good books, without being bogged down with a curriculum that we have to follow. And, on the flip side, I love following grammar curriculum. I would always follow grammar curriculum. Find the right one that you like and follow it. Maybe you have really good grammar, unlike me. And you can teach it more freely than I can. There are some subjects that are like that for all of us, right? And literature is one for me, and creative writing is another, where I don't need a lot of help, and I don't want a lot of help. I want to do it our way. So I hope that helps you and understand what we're doing and gives you some inspiration to go ahead and pick some of those 100 lists up and read through them, and maybe pick a few books on your own instead of somebody else picking them for you. Thanks for watching. See ya.